Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today is the Director of Housing Services from ShelterCare, Dana Petersen-Crabb. Dana, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
This is really cool. You had reached out to me, or one of the people that you work with reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in having you come and talk about what you do to help the houseless community in Lane County. And I was like, this is so great, because this is actually, when you had reached out, it was about a month ago. That was what I had already wanted to be talking about. And that was already kind of lining up for, I wanted to cover in the winter months. I wanted to cover the houseless situation in Lane County because it's the number one issue. It's the hot button issue. Everybody's talking about it. And during the winter months, when it's the coldest, it's the most dangerous for our unhoused community. We have a lot of people that don't make it through. So I wanted to talk about ways that you are helping people get homes, and what people that are in that position can do, and address some of the myths in the whole culture of it, and what citizens believe that may not be true. And then we're also going to talk about the housing first model, which is what ShelterCare is utilizing, and the pros and cons of that, and how it's working and how it's not working, and that kind of stuff. So thanks again. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just glad to be here.
Yeah. So let's get started by talking about you personally. I want to know, like I had said before, you are the Director of Housing Services at ShelterCare. What got you into this area of work?
Well, it's kind of a lifelong story. I always had kind of my own mental health stuff going on. So I have depression, and it kind of has always been there. When I was in, I think I was second grade, was when I first had a psych test or whatever. It looking at these different pictures, I didn't really understand what was happening. It came back up again when I was 14, around 13, 14, that I started to have more anxiety and depression and not really understanding what was happening. So I've seen a lot of therapists, talked to a lot of social workers, and I think it was around 14 that I was like, I don't like the people that I'm talking to. I kind of feel like I should do this. And another long sort of weird route led me to doing this kind of work. So I really liked the connection with people, and that I was like, I want to help people because I didn't understand what was happening to me. Sometimes still today, I don't understand what's happening to me. It feels really uncomfortable to feel like you're not part of your own mind,
like in control
sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, that resonates a lot with me. My mother struggled with PTSD and a lot of trauma and depression and mental health, and so did my brother, and they're both gone. I have a lot in my life. So that resonates a lot with me, and I'm really, and with my mom, she was a social worker. She went from being a single mom, divorcee or whatnot, to being a social worker with a master's degree and multiple degrees, and really successful, and so very similar. So I have a ton of respect for that, and thank you for being so open about that, because I think it's so incredibly beneficial to people that are at every step of that process, and so that's huge. So 12 years that you've been with ShelterCare, and you'd said you had kind of bounced around. What led you to ShelterCare? I noticed a little bit of an accent, so I don't think you were a Eugene native.
Oh, no. I'm originally from Illinois.
Yeah.
Right across the river from St. Louis, Missouri. So I've always kind of ended up working in a field that was where I had to relate to people. Or take care of people. I worked for 7 or 8 years in summer camp and Du Bois Center. So I loved doing that work, but the best part was connecting to the kids who were angry or sad, or there was something going on for them, and I could talk to them and just connect to them and say, well, what's going on? And I love doing that part. And I still sort of, it was kind of like resisting a calling in a sense, because I was like, well, I like doing theater. I think that's what I'm going to do. But I just kept coming back around to this, like connecting with people and, meeting people in my life who were like helpful to me, who were like, oh, listened to what I had to say, and not like, you have to be this way or you have to do this thing. They were like, what's going on? Like, what's getting in the way for you? And having those connections with people from camp, I got into it was like a young mentor role in a small community in Illinois. I totally forget the county, but it was like these tiny river communities like Waterloo, Columbia, and Dupo. And it's just these small communities where there wasn't a whole lot for kids to do. So I would, hang out with them, try to model healthy relationships with people. And I just loved all of that work. And when I moved out to Oregon, I'm like, I also got my degree in social work. So I have a bachelor's degree in social work. And it was just like, I found my passion in that.
Yeah. Do you think so? I know from personal experience with dealing with like alcoholism and recovery, which, depression came from that for me, but a lot of it showed its head more. Do you find, for me, helping people is the biggest reward and the best medicine, is by giving and giving of yourself, so for me, I've found like when people 5 years later, they're like, how did you do it? And I can kind of be like, well, here's some tips, here's some things to start with. And I'm not an expert on it. I'm not, professional like you are in your field. But do you find that is for your own personal headspace, that by giving back, that has been the best kind of quote unquote, the best medicine?
It's sort of a double-edged sword, because like I can do too much.
Sure.
I get a benefit from it. I like doing it, but when if I don't, like, I'm really hard on myself. The other piece of that is just like, I want to do so well that like, sometimes I'm like, if I wasn't nice enough, or if I wasn't always acting in kindness, I sort of beat myself up. And I'm like, I think the biggest struggle for a lot of people is that we give so much kindness to other people. We got to be kind to ourselves too. Right. And kind of that self kindness.
Well, there's also a vulnerability in when people are needing help, that the magnitude of when someone comes to you, what they're asking for. And so there's a lot of pressure to step up when you decide that you're going to do the work. Then you better follow through, kind of thing, because it's very important to not leave people hanging. So let's talk about ShelterCare. So ShelterCare, what is ShelterCare's primary goal? And first of all, what is ShelterCare? ShelterCare is based in Lane County, or is it national?
ShelterCare is just based in Lane County. They've been around for 50 years, they started with providing shelter, and then as it grew, became supported housing. We had apartments in the community, partnerships with landlords, and it's just kind of grown into shelter services, medical recuperation. We have behavioral health services, housing, we try to cover kind of like a lot of the bases, transitional housing. So that's what we've grown up into. And I mean, like, our mission is to compassionately house people.
Yeah.
And provide them the supports and services that they need to be successful and independent and in recovery out in the community.
Yeah. How do people usually find out about ShelterCare?
I think various ways. We partner with Homes for Good. We try to partner with a lot of different agencies just to get ourselves out there. we promote on our, social media, like other groups when, things are going on that they um, are really just like doing great work. And we go to, for example, we have REDS, which is a diversion program. So somebody who's just coming into a situation where they've just lost their home or just entering the system, we want to try to see if there's anything that, could be done to help them avoid entering into the shelter system. That could be any myriad of things. And I mean, like, that always is a little bit of a weird thing because, of course, like if you're trying to think of everything possible to avoid, getting into that situation. But sometimes we can offer some assistance or direct somebody into the right assistance to help them, avoid that, avoid the shelter system. So we do a lot of outreach to in like the Lindholm Center. That's where we usually are.
So my next question, you kind of already answered. I was going to ask, what do outreach efforts look like? But, I mean, I guess if somebody finds themselves homeless, is it just, where's the first place they normally go, for help?
I think it depends largely on the person. It's really hard to identify. I think most of the time that when I come in contact with someone, they're just calling around.
Yeah.
Like they Google or go to use the 211 resource.
Yeah.
And
that one is something
comes up.
I wasn't even aware of this until last episode. I was interviewing Kevin Cronin. Shout out to Kevin Cronin. He's does a ton of work in advocacy for the affordable housing is his main focus. But he talked about 211 and explained to me how that works and what kind of stuff 211 offers.
So that's a United Way 211. You can call the number. I usually just use the computer because you can go online. It's a United Way funded service, and they have just lists of agencies that provide services and what type of services that they provide. I think sometimes it's difficult with those things. Like Whitebird has a help book. So the help book serves a similar purpose. It's just on a book and paper form. But they have all of the agencies, services that you might want to find.
Yeah, and I mean it's just the 411 is calling for info. It's an info line. So 211.
Yeah, exactly.
211 is directly for people that are trying to get back on their feet. When people find themselves houseless, and it's a broad swath of people, and so it's a broad swath of needs and situations. But on average, how quickly is the process of being houseless to housed?
For us, usually, I think on average, lately, it's been about 60 to 90 days.
Yeah.
We used to, in some circumstances, we'll get lucky and have somebody within the first 30 days of entering our program get into something.
And you're talking about long-term housing. So in the meantime, there may be sheltering, right?
Okay. Yeah. And shelter can be, so we work primarily with centralized the Lane County Human Services Division has a centralized wait list. And this is for specific government programming, government funding that goes to emergency shelters. So an emergency shelter, if you are unhoused and you go to one of the agencies, like Catholic Community Services has some assessors that can help get people onto the centralized wait list. I think St. Vincent de Paul has some assessors. And So you go to an assessor, get connected with them, and they can connect you to some folks to get you into a shelter. Sometime, and I'm not sure from the date that somebody gets assessed to when they can get into shelter. It's a little bit different because we have very like multiple different streams to fund the shelter services.
Right.
So it just depends on that first assessment where you end up and how quickly you can get into shelter. But for medical recuperation, as soon as somebody is ready, we get those referrals from Pacific Source, Trillium, the essentially the Medicaid insurance providers, and those can go pretty quickly within a few days. Because that is somebody who's recovering from surgery, who's not sick enough to stay in the hospital, but still needs like a shelter so that they can, keep the wound clean, do
Right.
the care and stuff that they need to do.
Yeah. So let's talk about, do you mostly at ShelterCare specifically, do you mostly deal with individuals or families or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. We have housing services for families who primarily work with families. So they have some families, about four or five family shelters. Um, they have a rapid rehousing program. Rapid rehousing is support and rent assistance for it can go up to 2 years, but it's meant to be sort of transitional so that, I just need a little bit of help to get back on my feet. And then we have the Keystone Project, and that is permanent supported housing for 15 families. And in our other programs, I think there's in our permanent supported housing side of things, we have just a handful of families.
Now, explain to me permanent supportive housing, what it is, and what is ShelterCare's role?
So permanent supported housing is a comes out of the kind of the housing first idea. We have a mix of scattered site units. So these are units that are just out in the community. Our folks could be your neighbor, across the street. And we really want people to be integrated in the community. So it's as much like something that they found in the first place. And our side of things is to offer the rent assistance. So it's subsidized. And then in that time, we're helping people to connect to resources. If they're looking for a substance use treatment,
Right.
If they're looking for behavioral health treatment, medical doctors, whatever the case may be, if they're looking for a church, if they're looking for a volunteer opportunity, if they're looking for a job, our housing services are a jack of all trades. So they go in, help people to kind of like connect to those things and help them to and stay with them while they're trying to figure that out, because there are some skills that are lost because the people who are coming into these programs, have been homeless for years, a year, for a long time.
Sure.
And so when you're out,
the reason that they needed the help was because they maybe don't have those life skills. Now, I hear a lot of talk about vouchers. Is that what they're talking about? So is that with permanent supportive housing, is that where you could get a voucher where basically it's like, we will help you pay your bills, but there's not a but the deal is that there's going to be follow through. There's going to be oversight where somebody's kind of checking in to make sure that, you can manage these tasks to keep your house afloat. Is that kind of the model? Or
no, well, it's you don't have to participate in any of the services. It's not a voucher program. We do have, with the comments on MLK, with the Keystone, our partnerships with Homes for Good. Those two are project-based vouchers. So they're one site and each of the units are basically a voucher in and of themselves.
Right.
So, and we provide we partner with them to provide the services, like I just talked about.
Right. So I guess it just kind of depends more or less
Yeah,
what
it's
level someone
really
needs.
like
Yeah. Sometimes people are a little bit more on their own. Sometimes people need a little bit more help.
exactly. And those folks that need just a little less of our like the high intense, like weekly visits from what have you, those folks we're just waiting for a voucher sometimes because they don't have enough resources. They don't have enough income to like afford, the rents in this community.
Right.
Um,
And moving
so
costs
we're
and all
just
that.
waiting for the vouchers
Right.
a lot of the time. And because they've built up the skills and we're checking in to see how those skills are going. And they're just ready. They're just waiting.
Right. So let's go deep dive into the housing first model, and then we'll get to some myths and some other various issues I wanted to address before, getting out of here. So let's dive deep into the housing first model. Explain to me how the housing first model works. And let's just start with that.
So traditionally, it would be, okay, you want to get into this rent assistance program. You want to get into these services. You have to be clean. You have to be, taking your meds. You have to like check all these boxes. Housing First says, let's do housing first and get you into a place so that you don't have to worry about your basic survival needs anymore. And we can meet those so that you can focus on those other things, the other aspects of your health. So housing is number one in our book. And when people have that, they don't have to worry about where they're going to sleep tonight, where their food's coming from, if they're going to get, like, if they have found a place to sleep, are they going to have to, gather everything up and move? Are they going to lose their stuff? Trying to hold on to your medications. If I had to take insulin and I'm outside, that's impossible.
Yeah.
So I think with the housing first model, it just says you get housing and first, so then you can focus on these other things. And to take it even further, some of our folks, it's like understanding a lease and all of the nuances of a lease. We're not going to be successful that first time. We're going to have to find another place to live after this. So we're going to keep supporting somebody and moving them into another apartment so that honestly, like the third or fourth time that you get into a new place, that's the place.
Yeah.
Because it changes as you learn and as you take in those kind of learning situations, those learning lessons, you're like, oh, okay.
Right. And
now I get it.
Their level of need, exactly. Their level of need changes. And so the situation of where you might be at might change. So this model, the housing first model is gaining a lot of national traction. Was this something that was started here or was this? No. Okay.
No, they're like Utah, I think, was the first place that really got like the attention, national attention. Sure. I think it's been like in New York, East Coast. I think they had very like a housing first model, but I think Kentucky was thrown in there as different models of care go. But housing first is, it's all over the place now. I think there's Colorado just had a really some successful outcomes with one of their projects for the FUSE population, frequent user system engagement.
I want to talk too about, some of the struggles and challenges with it. I've heard talk that one of the major issues with the model is staffing. And that's an issue across the board in every area of America right now. But
Mhm.
staffing issues and the limits to, getting to basically the limits to federal funding. It's like the admin costs aren't covered. So there's not enough workers to actually do what is required because there's not enough federal funding.
Mhm.
I mean, how do we fix that when people are they're like, we've paid enough, like people are like, I don't want to keep paying for it,
Mhm.
and I mean, the issue I see, and these are my words, is that you have conservatives that are constantly fighting not to, or Republicans, whatever you want to say, constantly fighting because they're like, I don't want these social programs to work because then they're going to want more of them. So let's just cut the funding to them so that they'll fail. And then we can say that they don't fail and we'll keep getting reelected. And it's this
Mhm.
vicious cycle where you have to invest. So, I mean, I guess, what are some of the struggles that you see? Is that the major one, is funding, basically?
Yeah, funding is it's difficult because you're talking about the length of time that it takes to kind of figure out like, oh, okay, we're going to fund this. And now everybody gets into a room and they make decisions about how much will go where. That comes down to like the county level. And then by the time it gets here, they're like, here is $100.
Yeah.
You have to spend $70 or $85 on direct support, rent, things like that. But this the other little bit is for you, the people that work for you, how you have an office and keep your lights on. You do have to have internet, so that like $10 or $15, that all has to cover that. Ew, and we want you do have to submit these quarterly reports that are like 17 pages long, and you have to detail all of this information. And we're like, oh, who do who who do that?
Mm-hmm.
um because we don't have enough money to pay for somebody to do that. There's so many of these regulations that kind of, and I mean, like, I get it. Where I lived in Illinois, I saw there was a lot of corruption.
Yeah. That's
And
the catch
there's
22.
always going to be that stuff. I mean, like, we see it in for profit, we see it in nonprofit. But nonprofits, by and large, are so careful because we have to do all of these different things and we're taking care of people.
Right.
So we want to make sure that like people see like this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it.
Right. It's so
Um,
difficult. That's the age old, question challenge, is that,
mhm.
you have all these goodwill programs that are the goals are to help, and then there's just not enough funding, which makes it seem like it's not working. And then people are like, see, these programs don't work. People just need to work, and it's not that simple. It's just not.
Yeah,
It's just not
it's
that
not,
simple.
it's
And
just not. I mean, like, yeah, you're going to pay for it some way.
right.
So, like, you take out like years ago in the 60s, where they closed down a lot of the mental health hospitals because they were expensive.
Right.
And
And
so
not
they
bringing
closed
in
those down.
revenue.
And
Yeah.
now all these people are out in the community with nowhere to go, with no community supports. Without community supports are much cheaper than, because what's going to happen? People are going to go to the hospitals. They're going to go to these public services that are much more expensive, and
Right.
like it's not really a useful thing.
Yeah.
Or
You
it's
know.
going to the hospital, it's going to like jail, prison.
Right. Which
where
is
where
maybe
are
by
people going to
design.
go?
That's one of the things I used to jokingly say this, but when people would say, do you have a primary care provider? And I would say, oh yeah, the emergency room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how is that cost effective for our society? So especially since when I was in those positions, I wasn't going to pay for it. It was Bridges assistance or whatever it was because I didn't have the money. So
Mm-hmm.
thank God there was the programs, but I'm just saying that it's like that's not cost effective. There's a meme I saw one time. It's funny. It was so true, and it was a picture of John Boehner, but it doesn't matter. And it just said, we've tried nothing, and we're all out of ideas. And it's like that strategy is just not going to work. So we're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
make these programs like Housing First that are actually using some thought, where we're like, let's be humanitarian about this, treat people with dignity so that they then can start working on their mental health and fighting their addictions. If that's the case, a lot of it's not addiction. We're going to talk about that,
Yeah,
in a
and we
bit.
have to pay the people who are doing the work
Exactly.
an a livable
Right.
wage.
So,
Or we have to, I've said no to funding because it didn't it wasn't going to pay for the people who were doing the work.
Sure.
And that's the thing that like that's what we'll see more and more is like it's so much work to get even just get the funding. It's so much work.
And it's qualified work. It's more than just volunteer work, because there is stuff that volunteers incredible. You can get, and we need more and more and more people doing things so that they can fill in gaps. But you need people that are trained, that know and know the situation, so that they're not constantly just kind of winging it, so that they do things that are tried and true, that they've proven to work. So that takes funding, and that takes sustainable income for the employees to want to stay in that field. So that's a big one. Let's talk about some of the myths with homelessness, and then we'll get to that in just a second. Let's talk about COVID. Okay, so housing navigation in the COVID area. This was a question given to me by Kevin Cronin. What does it take to go from looking to lease up, and how much more challenging is it during the COVID era?
It's been a bit of a challenge. We have had to put different safety protocols in place. Some of the things that we would have liked to do, we just couldn't do because there wasn't resources. But we have challenges with transportation. So if we were to, go see a place, to check it out, to look to see if it's, the layout's going to work, or it's in a good location for the person, anything that we would do, it's challenging because it was hard to get around on the bus, or it's, pretty far out there. So you have to, pick somebody up. And when everything first started, we weren't transporting anybody. So it just
adds another layer. Yeah.
It was so challenging.
Yeah.
And, but now I think we've gotten really good about how we're getting people housed, and, really that comes down to some of the landlords that we've been working with, who've been just so understanding, who've wanted to help, who, trust us as an agency.
Yeah.
So, I think, big shout out to the landlords, who are working with us. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to name them because I won't name all of them.
That's good, because sometimes I think that that's good to hear, because a lot of times you only hear the negatives. You don't hear the positives, that there's been people that have just been super great in that. And so that's awesome. This may not be something you do, and maybe it is, but what about vaccine for the houseless community? Is there a lot of outreach efforts? I actually, oh gosh, I'm not going to drop the name, because I've been talking behind the scenes with a group that is working to do that specifically. But is that something that you've kind of seen those efforts, and how that can work? I mean, because that's something that when we're talking about transporting people, it's like if they're unvaccinated, it adds a whole different risk,
Yeah, we've had successes with some of the vaccine clinics. I know that in our partnership with Homes for Good, the Commons on MLK, we have had a couple of vaccination clinics there for the residents. So they set those up, and they've been great. We've had a mobile clinic out to our shelter sites. And I think and just spreading the word, but yeah, there's definitely a need for, we've supported, I think, other agencies, just saying, you need us to sign a letter. Do you want a letter? What do you need? Let's get this going. So we support that fully to get vaccinated, because it's, especially with, when everything hit, we lost hundreds of shelter beds, places for people to go. It was a significant amount. And we're just trying to start getting back up there, because it was all congregate shelter. So you're sharing space with everyone.
Yeah.
And it's just been a real challenge. That was that was the biggest hit I think that the community took, was just losing those beds.
I can't even imagine. I've talked to Chris McAllister quite a bit about
Mm-hmm.
the work with the shelters that he was working with, and during the COVID lockdowns, and how much it was just it was harder to find volunteers. It was harder to find people, paid workers. They were asking people. I mean, it's just so many layers of challenge there, and yeah, that was not a good situation. I'm glad it's starting to slowly get better, but we're all kind of just with COVID. We're all like, fool me once. Like, I don't trust that we're out of the woods. We're not out of the woods. There's so much more, and it could get worse. And we're all being, very careful. But the most important thing we can do is continue to just get people to get vaccinated, make sure to get your booster shots, and fight through the, hysteria on social media. And you have to just ignore it and just keep putting out facts and science.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's so challenging. So let's talk about some myths in the houseless community, because I think that for people, there's just, it's so easy. And I've found myself doing it too. I came up with some stupid idea. Well, I don't know if it was stupid. I was thinking about the reasons people are starting to have like this almost festival feel of houselessness. And I'm not saying everyone, I'm saying a small group, but we saw it in 2009 with the Occupy Wall Street movement. Then there was the sleeps camp. And then it felt like there was this whole kind of comfort level of a structure of like a festival feel, where people are like, wait, I'll just do this and not try. And that's really frustrating to people that are working hard and doing things. And I know that's a small group, and I know it exists. I've seen it with my own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the most common cause of houselessness? I mean, it's not drug addiction like people think. I mean, what is it usually?
Not having enough income.
Yeah.
Or like, if you cannot afford rent, like, even 4 years ago. So I've worked with ShelterCare 12 years, and I've always worked with, rent assistance or housing, providing service to folks who are in rapid rehousing. So like, rent was always on my mind. And really, within like 5 or 6 years ago, I just remember like talking to other people and recognizing that like rents are going up, like within a year, $120, less than a year.
Yeah.
So these rents were like just skyrocketing. And around that same time, that landlords were no longer, or property management were no longer able to like say no Section 8. So we did see an increase in rents like right before that happened, or right as that was happening. And like some of these kind of tenant protection laws, you'll see an increase like right before. So rents have just like skyrocketed. We have more people. I'm from Illinois. I'm part of the problem. I came in here, took up some space.
I think you're doing your part to balance out that.
It's
a net gain. It's a net gain, what you're doing for the community.
But it's the reality is that we do have a lot of people coming from other places into our community. And our community it's not like, property wise, it's not growing out, and you can't grow up. So there's just, we're just like trying to, fill little spaces here and there. Yeah. And I think we have to talk about this. It's just a very big problem. Myth wise, we see all the folks that we work with usually have some sort of mental health diagnosis. So on our end, mental health is the biggest kind of barrier that we're seeing. So depression.
Those are symptoms of, depression, addiction, drug use. Mm-hmm. Those are symptoms of mental health. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So when
you're self-medicating because you can't get your stuff, or it's the only thing that makes you feel better,
or deal with the things. Really, the reason that I would use when I was younger was to disappear for a few hours, to not have to, and what I tell college age kids about drugs and stuff, I'm not gonna lie and be like, don't ever do anything ever, don't ever explore your brain. But at the same time, it's like, that's not going to be an effective method. Like, just say no. It's not going to work to tell people that. But what I say is, like, if you're trying to escape that, maybe, everything out there, maybe just explore a little bit. But if you're trying to escape this, what's inside your brain, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, we were talking about going to raves, and I was trying to meet him where he's at, because he's 20 years old, and I'm talking to this kid, and I'm like, I'm not going to tell you, like, don't do things, you know what I mean? But I'm also wanting to make sure you understand. It's like, you need to be self-actualized enough to address that you're having these triggers that make you want to escape your own brain. And that's going to be a dangerous recipe, So,
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are some other myths about the houseless community that for you that are irritating and frustrating? Is there any that
I
pop
think
up?
like the number of people, like the number of that there's just people coming here for services
I'm so glad you say this. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
because we just don't see that. There's so many folks that we work with who are like, uh, people who I know grew up here are like, oh yeah, that person I knew in high school, or this person that I'm like, these are people from this area.
Right.
Yeah, there's people. I mean, like I said, I'm from Illinois.
Sure.
There's people coming into this community all the time. And yeah, we have services, but we turn a lot of people away. We're not able to help everyone. And there clearly isn't enough. I think a lot of it is just, like I said, the causes of homelessness, the myths are all going to be surrounded in people don't have enough income.
Right.
And the rents are too expensive and they've been outside for a really long time. I mean, how do you get there's jobs available. How do you get a job when you don't have transportation, don't have a place to like take care of your hygiene needs?
Right. Well, it sounds like to me the most important thing we can do as a society is let's focus on talking about mental health so that we can, because mental health can lead to not being able to work, not being able to have income, and so if we can talk about mental health, we can talk about affordable income, or living a livable wage and affordable housing. Those three things, and then we can really start to change this, as opposed to like, just get people jobs and tell them to stop doing drugs. That's not gonna work. Like, it hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And people want to say, oh, it's only happening in liberal communities. And maybe there is a sliver of truth to that. Like what you're saying about this myth that people come here because of services. It's like, well, you're not going to stay where you're literally the only thing that you're going to, people are going to tell you the solution is that you can just die in the street,
Well, and if you look at other places in other cities, like, for example, St. Louis, it depends on where you're at, because people are not going to be super visible, because when you're super visible, you're going to be arrested or picked up, or people are not going to put themselves out there so that they can get into trouble. But if you're in the right place, like St. Louis Library, when it closes for the night, everybody suddenly comes out of that building, and like there's a church like nearby, and you'll see people start to like hang out outside of the church, or trying to find a warm place to be.
Just shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what people are looking for here. It's just that here we can see them. Right. They're in front of our faces. Yeah. And we're, again, that like small, when you have a smaller, it's condensed area. There's a lot of like reasons that I think it's different here.
Totally. I think bigger cities, and Eugene's growing, in bigger cities, you see it a lot more prevalent. I mean, Los Angeles, it's an explosion of houselessness, and Portland obviously is just, I mean, there's just so much, so many,
and it's not new.
No,
like,
of course not.
No. None of it's new. Like, there's just I'm glad that you said that. I think about Eugene all the time. Like, it's kind of this new, it's growing up.
Yeah.
And it's like in that weird,
not metropolis. Yeah, but
I mean, awkward teen stage.
Sure.
Is where we're at, maybe.
I mean, Springfield is like 70,000 people, and so Eugene, Springfield, and then, I mean, it's just expanding and the gaps between it is shrinking, and I mean, it's just growing a lot. So I've lived here for 25 plus years, and I'm an Oregonian born and raised. So I've seen it change dramatically. And it'll be interesting to see what things look like in a couple years when COVID hopefully is, we'll just say, under a little bit more control.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a lot of time left. There's a couple things I wanted to talk about first. What are your thoughts on ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation, placing boulders under the bridge on Coburg Road? So if you drive, like if you're heading from Springfield is where I was coming, or Coburg. So I went 126 and then hit Coburg, like I'm going basically under the Ferry Street Bridge. Now on the left-hand side, they've put in these massive boulders so that people can't sleep there. This is so difficult because in some ways I see it where it's like, well, maybe that's not the right place to be. But in some ways, I think it is the right place for people to be. You're not in a commercial area. You're not in a residential area. You're kind of in a no man's land. And it's like, whatever, just go ahead and sleep there. It's covered. You're not going to get rained on, but
Yeah.
it's difficult. What are your thoughts on it?
It's that tough situation. It comes down to, where do folks go now?
Yeah.
Because there, if we just keep taking away places, say, okay, I don't want people sleeping in front of my business, or I don't want people in my garbage, or I don't want that,
not at the park, not at the
park, not at the,
right.
that public public places. So, and also not in places like under bridges where I wouldn't have noticed them anyway.
Right.
Not on near the train tracks. We just keep moving the goalposts.
Yeah.
And which is really unfair to some folks, because and also I can't imagine for the outreach folks who are out in the streets, doing that work. You're kind of trying to find, and service providers are trying to find people. And if they keep having to move, we can't get to them.
Right. That's a different thing I didn't think of. Yeah. That it's like, now we have to, discover where they're staying, and now it's spread out more too. So yeah, I don't know. Now, last question, and then we're going to get out of here. What are other services and groups, nonprofits, what have you, in our community that are doing great things? And besides ShelterCare, I know that your name pops up all the time when you talk about the services in our community and one of the best programs. But what are some other services that you'd like to shout out in our community? And of course, we're going to leave people out. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to give a shout out to Core, Core they do the street feeds, and because they're finding, I'll let you go, but they're finding a group that's underserved, because it's kind of like the punk rock teens, so it's just so cool that there's like a specific focus, and it's not just that anybody can come, and I'm going to try to get them back on the podcast and had them on in the past. And I encourage everyone to go back and listen to those episodes. With Blair Conrad, Homeless in Eugene, was one of my best, most successful episodes. She was actually homeless, turned her life around. She cited ShelterCare as a service that really helped her a lot. What are some other services in our community that you think are doing some great things?
Oh, Core I was like, okay, I'm just going to name two. And Core was going to be one of them, because
I stole that.
Yeah. But hey, it's your show. Do what you need to do. Core, they're so wonderful. I mean, they've grown so much in the last few years. The things that they do, they really did find that community, that age group that needed some support. And they were out there. I just remember I was so pleased to see them out. They were out there in the thickest smoke during the wildfires.
Yeah.
Just delivering stuff, giving people masks, getting them water, doing everything. I mean, they're the postman of outreach.
Yeah.
Neither wind, sleet, or rain.
Everyone, go back and listen to that episode. It's a good one.
Yes, they're great.
So we got one more. Yeah.
One more. Carry It Forward.
Okay.
They've been another group who just has grown and grown and grown, and really supports folks in a way that's, I feel like it's just so kind of holistic, like showers, outreach, huts. I mean, helping people to develop job skills, or they just do it all. They're kind of wonderful.
Yeah,
They're
if
wonderful.
Chris McAllister decides to run for public office again and you don't vote for him, you don't care about your community. I'm just
Yeah.
I think that was such a great race that he was running in a campaign against two amazing candidates for city council in Springfield. But Chris McAllister, who works with Carry It Forward, is doing just incredible work. He's an incredible human being, and endless
energy.
Oh my gosh, and
endless energy, compassion for. I mean, like, I don't even know. Tireless.
Tireless. Yeah. Some would say a chihuahua. But so this is why I love what I do, because I get to meet people like you. Not only are you kind, you're compassionate and doing really positive things for our community, but I've met people like Chris, and I've met people like Kevin Cronin, and I've met people like the people at CORE. And I just am really honored to be able to give a platform to people in our community that are actually trying to make a change and make a difference. And so it's really cool. And I am, I do my part by just giving the platform and put it out there into the ether, and then have whoever wants to listen to it can, but it's really neat. And I'm honored to have you as a guest and also learn more about the programs that we're doing. Now, the website, oh, I didn't write it down. Is it sheltercare.org? Is it that simple?
Yes.
Okay. Sheltercare.org is the website that people can go to. And there's a ton of information. If you'd like to donate, volunteer, there's all kinds of opportunities for that there. And there's also probably links to other services and different, sources for more information. I looked at the website. It's beautifully crafted. I took the picture for the flyer of your team. You guys all putting your hand in together. And it was a cool one. And so, shout out to everybody at ShelterCare, and Dana. It's really awesome to meet you, and thank you so much for doing this. I consider you to be a friend now. I'll definitely be shooting you a Facebook request.
Excellent.
So thank you so much. Hey, we're gonna get out of here. I want to wish everybody happy holidays. I've got one more episode in the works, and so we'll talk a little bit more about Christmas and the holidays on the next episode. So we're going to end this with a song. This is a newly released track. I don't even know if it's released yet or if it's going to be hitting social streaming sites soon. But this is the song called Stew, which is by Gradient featuring Krizz Kaliko. Thank you so much.
Yeah. If I'm feeling good, it's got to be real because I can't fake it. As far as looking good, I'm hoping that rhyming with conviction and heart is more essential. So we'll see.
Not long ago, I lost a home and a car in the same day. And in the moment, I thought that I may break. But even though it was harder to stay focused, well, if you know me, you know I never vacate. Not when the world been spinning like a Beyblade. Grip it and rip it until the thing shake. Destabilize and never maintain. But take from your neighbor, that's a great gain. With senators sent to play the same game. Inside a trade so they can make bank. So the Kirsten Cinemas and Joe Mansions got their home cinemas and their old mansions. Wanna put they pay before you. Ooh, then we cry and vote blue. Really don't know what's inside of your stew, but I know that never can I now trust you. If your heart's made of coal, we then combust you. Walls up, no Kool-Aid man could bust through. I'm looking like Schoolie D meets the tool EP, plus the food he eats is up too. Can't help it, I do mean to disrupt you, cause any looming trust is up, dude. I'm low on charge, let me write you later. Then who needs up, he got you. Electric shock and all, verbal bock and all. Watch I'm walking all on your vocabulary. On a tear like I'm perforated, aerated, percolated. All the perjury I thought I had to bury. Another Ryan Gories and the David DeMarcs across 5 years that made fake remarks. Yo, when you're spreading a lie and you're not getting it right, I think the evidence might be one place to start. When you betray the truth, then you betray yourself. Stew in the pain and try and drain it slow. I can understand we getting tricked into bullying, but hurry up and take responsibility, bro. Being homeless and carless, got nothing on the pain of bigoted harm. And my people frequently targeted, so when I speak, I keep receipts. Please proceed, Cali.
Yeah, many men can't walk a mile in my shoe. Took a while, I got proof. Not in style, I got move. Dumb it down, but I tried and they lied to a job. I'm not cool. And everyone inside, but not you. Always wanna sit on the side of my pool. Think it got way more pride than I do. Oh well, still living alive, I'm not through. Pick it up and then I'm putting it down beside you. And I cry till I'm blue. Really don't know what's inside of your stew, but I stay 10 toes down in my shoe. Made it kinda sicker as if I had a flu. Would've been different given it time, but I'm through. I was trying to make me a hole to climb through. Everybody told me you're too hard to find you, Kylie.